So I'm going to run through a demo of our document automation, which is essentially an automated module that allows you to do invoices as well as credit notes, customer remittances, but I'm going to concentrate on the conversion of customer sales orders to a purchase order. We'll stick that purchase order on, create a sales order, we'll then create a works order, and then we'll use our barcoding to pick it and obviously dispatch that back out again. Now, typically customers would have an email set up in order to receive their customer purchase orders or indeed invoices, but I'm just going to quickly upload this from my local machine, basically. So here's our document automation module. If I open that up, and all I'm going to simply do is load this up, and it's kind of like a child. You do need to teach it in the first instance. So if I come and find my good old Abbey retail purchase order, and all it's doing in the background is it's just checking to see if there's a training model in the background. So we do need to teach it in the first instance where to look for that information. But of course, once you've invested that time in training the system moving forwards, you're going to be saving a huge amount of time not having to key this data in. So it's just telling me that there's no training model. We simply need to come and teach it, as I said, where to look for that information. So very simply, I'm just going to say that's where you need to look for the requested date. That's where you need to be looking for the purchase order number. And then I'm just going to teach it the line. Now, don't worry too much. If you have customer purchase orders with lots and lots of lines, you're not going to have to teach it every single line. We've got a great little utility, a button on the right-hand side that you click, and it'll just pick up every single line for you. So we're simply teaching it the first line in order for the system to know where else it needs to feed that information through to. So we then have our total net. Oh, if I actually put it in the right place. So total net. And of course, as you can probably see at the bottom there, if delivery addresses are different to the invoice address, then we can put that in as well. Now VAT, and then our total, and then you'll see that this will then create our training model for us. So next time we get a purchase order from this particular customer from Abbey Retail, I'm not having to key that same information in second time. Now it's just creating that training model in the background for me. And then it's warning me that there's a couple of things that it has flagged up. I'm not worried about that because we're going to create a works order in a minute. So it's basically telling me that I don't have any free stock and I don't have a specific price set up for this customer. So I don't need to worry about that. So I'm now going to create my sales order in standard Sage sales order processing. And of course, that saved me, as I said, a huge amount of time then having to key that in. So standard Sage, let's move our barcoding device out of the way, not quite sure why that's popped up. Let's grab our Sage sales order processing, and there we go. So we've fed through the fact that we've got our Sicon umbrella, which we're going to create, as I said, as a works order in a moment. And very simply, I've got a couple of extra pop-ups on my screen just because I have a few other modules of Sicons turned on, like distribution. So that pop-up that you just saw a second ago is distribution as an example. And the next thing that's going to pop up in a minute is it's going to ask me, do I want to create, there we go, our works order? And I'm going to say yes. So that's now going to create my works order and send a job sheet down to our production team. So not only have we created our customers sales order, we've also created a works order in the background. So if we come into works order processing now, you'll see our good old Sicon umbrella. There we go. There's our Sicon umbrella. And we have, and this is all pulled through for a bill of materials, so I'll be able to see what we're manufacturing as a finished item. And I've also, of course, got all of the individual components. You'll see in a moment that I'll run through MRP, so where perhaps we might have a shortfall of stock issues, MRP will then pick up that shortfall automatically for me. So it's looking holistically at all of those stock items that have already been pre-allocated and allocated to other jobs as well. But it's also through pull-through operations. So what we often find with customers nowadays is they're looking more towards trying to do more planning as an integrated solution. So how much availability have I got from a labor perspective? How much availability have I got from a machine perspective? And actually how many jobs are coming in to be able to marry that up. So you'll see shortly that we can, all of that information can drop into a diary view for us. But also we've got the ability to be able to clock onto that using shop floor data capture to be able to capture our actual labour time. So how much time has this job actually taken us, and therefore how much profitability have we made off the back of it? So with that in mind, I'm going to run MRP. So you'll see MRP does a couple of things actually for me. So it can make suggestions of works orders. So instead of me creating that works order at that point, what I could have done actually is I could have just literally run works order processing and suggested purchase orders through here. And what it would do in the background is it just simply looks at my minimum stock level. So if you do manufacture for stock, then this can make those suggestions for you. It'll look at your stock levels. It'll look at your production lead time to say, right, you don't have enough stock, and this is when you need to be producing them by. It'll also look at all of those sales orders that you've got in the system. And again, when have you suggested to the customer that you're going to manufacture them by? And also, again, that production lead time, to make those suggestions. The next thing that it's doing is it's making a suggestion of materials to purchase. So once again, looking at minimum stock levels, looking at your preferred suppliers lead time, looking at all of those components and those works orders where we need to purchase for, as well as perhaps other replenishment of stock. And all of these, as you'll see in a moment, are only suggestions. Nothing is set in stone. We don't need to kick anybody out of Sage. It's just merely a suggestion of what we need to be ordering or manufacturing. And then we still have the ability to essentially make changes where we want to. And we can even import a sales forecast if we wanted to. So whether that could be a forecast from customers or forecast from salespeople. So any moment now, one of the things that you'll see is some warning. So where perhaps it thinks something might not be manufactured in time, it'll also make some rescheduling suggestions. Where perhaps you might have bulk storage areas and you want to be moving that stock from your bulk storage to your local production area, we can also set up minimum stock suggestions where we can do that transfer from bulk locations. And for those of you who are in maybe a food manufacturing industry or anywhere where you have to have expiry dates, as you'll see in a moment, it'll also flag up perhaps where we have stock that's also out of date as well. So it's really is giving us that whole visibility of all of that information. Now, one of the things that I think is really handy about the suggestion of purchase orders and indeed the works orders is the information that it gives you behind the scenes. So you're not having to try to unpick, well, why is it making that suggestion? Well, it'll give you a drill down and what we call our inners and outers, what's coming in and what's going out, to make life really, really simple for you to be able to determine why it's making that suggestion. And the other thing that we can do is we've also got the ability to link this to an approval portal. So we're finding a lot of customers now are wanting to manage cash flow better. And instead of just reliant upon their production managers just ordering stock, they're saying, well, actually, just check with finance first that, there's sufficient enough cash, particularly if you're buying, massive amounts of items and large, not just large volumes, but obviously large cash volumes. So that can be sent through to a mobile app, purchase requisitions, where it just simply pings an email notification out to whoever needs to sign off on it, and that can be multiple people, just to double check that, as I said, there's sufficient enough cash in order to pay for those items. So just, making sure that finance speak to production and vice versa. So that's something else that this can tie into. And similarly, the portal that I've just mentioned, purchase requisitions, also does holidays and HR. So that can feed into our scheduler, as we'll come and talk about in a moment. So from a production perspective, I really do start to have complete visibility of where there may be a gap or where we might have a problem. If we've got a couple of members of staff off sick or maybe on holiday, I need to have that in the diary. So that may impact a job that we're about to do. So having all of that feeding in all electronically from a mobile app, so your staff can be submitting holidays and feed that through for approval. And once it's fully approved, as I said, it will then feed into the diary for you. So, as I mentioned, there we go. So we've got our items that are suggesting might not be built in time. We've got a few items where it's saying you could fulfill your demand if it was rearranged. And as we suggested, we can do some stock transfers, and where you have traceable items where perhaps you've got dates, so you can see I've got some baked beans there, and it's given me the use by date, sell by date, and the batch traceable information there as well. So we can go straight to those items and we know which ones there's a problem with. And then we've got our suggested works orders. So what is it that we need to be manufacturing? What's the quantity? But as I said, we can override that if we needed to. It's telling us when we need to be manufacturing that for, and I've even got that drill down reason, basically showing me why it's making that suggestion. Let's come up with a better one than that. That's not a great example. Let's come up with the good old combi controller. So you'll see in a second, we've got a drill down with what we call, as I said, our inners and outers. So that's a much better example. So I can see what's going out as a sales order, but what's coming in. So what are we manufacturing to bring that stock levels back up again? So we've got all, yes, we've got all those works orders, building the stock levels back up again, but look at all those sales orders taking our stock out. And we've got the customer's name and of course the sales order number. So working our way all the way down, taking into account any minimum stock levels, but also minimum batch size runs. So that's essentially why it's telling me to manufacture 270 as a suggestion to bring my minimum stock balance back to 0 again. So as I mentioned, it does make that whole process of unpicking that suggestion really, really simple. And then I just simply select all and I can create my works orders. And as you saw, that will then generate a works order in the background for me. So it's pretty much the same really with suggested purchase orders. So we've got our preferred suppliers lead time along with the date requested, but we can of course change that. We can pull through our stock codes and descriptions. So there's our good old umbrella components that we needed. But it can also pull through your supplier part numbers for you if that happens to be different to yours. So when we produce the purchase order for you, it'll automatically populate through your supplier's part number. Now, I've even got, and this particular button is available in various places, just giving you, again, that holistic view as to where these stock items are. Well, actually, I've already got 60 coming in on 3 purchase orders, but I can see one of those are already ring fenced and pre-allocated to a couple of other jobs that we've got coming in. I can see any allocations and any demands on some works orders, what we physically got in stock, but actually what we have actually got available. Because, of course, if we've got stock already allocated to other jobs, then clearly we don't have that amount of stock available. Now it's going to pull through the supply for me, but I could change the supply if I wanted to. So as you can see, it pulls through every single supply that we have on Sage. And then we've got some just very simple purchasing analysis. So I can see my historical purchases, month to date, year to date in the last 12 months. And again, once again, I can drill down to see why it's making a suggestion of 330. Well, again, it's taking into account my minimum stock level, in this case of 50. Potentially, we can also take into account any preferred supplies minimum order quantity. But again, we've got our coming in purchase orders, going out demand on our works orders. And again, we can also import, as I said, a sales forecast on there as well. And then very simply, I can either just simply select certain items, and it would help if I had a supply. Yeah, so I can select certain items, or I can select all here, and then as you'll see in a second, it will then automatically generate my purchase orders for me. So, and again, as I mentioned, that's where we could push this through for requisition, so we can lock down the creation of that purchase order, and we can just simply create our purchase requisitions for us. So all that's going to happen now is that it's going to create my purchase orders for me, and that could be for multiple different suppliers if we needed it to, or the same supplier. So there we go. How quick was that? I don't have to be typing those purchase orders out. It's just automatically generated that purchase order with all of those lines within a matter of seconds for me. But I've got the ability to see, well, hang on a minute, why were we buying those items? I can see that that was for that works order specifically. And I can also see that that's, again, where we've got any pre-allocations, I'd be able to see that as well. So let's create that purchase order. That's now done. And we'll just quickly, before we book that purchase order in, let's just quickly dip into the planning side of things. So I can very simply just have a look at my peaks and troughs. This is a really quick and simple way of being able to identify where my peaks and troughs are. So we pop in the background what your labour availability is and your machine availability. And then this just simply maps out and looks at all of the works orders with all of the demand in this case. But I can drill down to see by teams, by employees, by groups of machines or individual machines, where again those peaks and troughs are. So as you'll see in a second, this will populate my demand any moment now. So there we go. We can see on any given day. So I've got what looks like 24 hours worth of labour demand on that day, and we can see that that's all made up of that one works order. And I can even drill into to see that works order if I wanted to. But if we did want to look at that more in a typical diary style view, of course, we can do that as well, whether that's looking at the works order. So there's that combi controller. There's my little umbrella that we've just generated. I can drag and drop and I can move that around if I wanted to. But it's just doing that scheduling for me automatically. But I can, as I said, I can look at that by employees and machines as well. So if you do want to start doing planning specifically by employees and by teams, I can do as well. Now, I mentioned shop floor data capture. So one of the things that we are finding with customers is that they're wanting their staff to be able to do a number of different things, really. They want to be able to capture the labour time, to be able to assess how much time these jobs are taking them. They want to be able to capture inspection processes, as well as potentially any additional components that they may have used. So this is where our shop floor data capture app comes in, and that can be run on a tablet, on a monitor on the wall, or a little device. And it just simply connects to Sage via one Sage Web Connector license. And all we're basically going to do now is clock on. One of the things I should have done is made a note of the works order number. So if we make a note that it's 6238001, and I can, of course, search. So if I just quickly come back to here. So I'm going to clock on. And all I'm going to do now is say I want to come to the production area, and I'm going to find that works order specifically. So this also, of course, saves you sending paper job sheets down. So saves a huge amount of money in printer ink and paper, but of course, a much more efficient way of getting that information down to your staff. So let's do a quick search for that one that we've literally just produced. So there's my umbrella that we've literally just produced. And it's just giving me the information about the job, so I can see the detail of the job. I'm manufacturing a Sicon umbrella. We've got our works order number, how many I'm manufacturing, and of course the start date and the due date. And then all I basically do is clock on. So this is where it's now going to automatically capture the time for me, and then pick up my cost. So if I've got a different cost, as an example, to a different employee, it will pick up my cost specifically and post that onto the job for me. And as you'll see in a moment, I can then stop and pause that. So maybe if I'm going on a break or lunch, or perhaps we've got problems in production, or maybe the machine's broken, you can have any types of reasons you like as to why we've stopped this at this point in time. But that, as you'll see in a moment, will then automatically feed back to the works order, to the job back in Sage. So rather than the office staff having to constantly chase around the production to find out where that job is and which team it's in and how much longer it's going to take, they can see all of that electronically and automatically back in Sage. So I'm going to stop and pause that. And as I said, I can say I've made 5 and I'm going to have a late lunch today. This is where we could feed through some inspection processes if we wanted to, so we could have a configurable set of questions and answers, or I could add on some materials here. So I could say, well, actually, I needed to add on, I don't know, another one of those. Let's say that one there. So I can add in the reason. So it forces the person to put in the reason and the quantity along with any comments at the bottom. And that will just then automatically feed back to Sage for me. So if we now dip back in quickly into the works order now, you'll see a couple of things will have happened. It will have automatically, there we go. So can you see it's automatically fed back that I've made 5 and that's now, I finished in that particular team specifically. But if I come to the labor tab, we've got, there we go. Sarah's finished her time and it's fed through my actual number of hours and the time that it's taken. And again, the cost, which is the important bit. So, you know, if that person's taken a little bit longer than perhaps they should have done, why have they taken a little bit longer? Is it a training issue? What's the problem there? So let's come and feed in our purchase order with barcoding now. So let's come into purchase order processing. So standard Sage purchase order processing, and you saw we had that. Let's refresh that for a second. There's our umbrellas are us. So you'll see we've got our purchase order in there that we created a moment ago. And you'll see that obviously we haven't received those in just yet because clearly we've only just produced that. So this is where I'm going to come to barcoding now, and we're going to pick that up as a purchase order. So again, I'm not having to send down purchase orders on bits of paper to my staff and then having to key that back into Sage. All of that can be fed from the device. So similar, I guess, to shop floor data capture, it runs as an app on a device, doesn't need a full Sage client license. And all I'm going to do is come to my device, we'll come and find that particular purchase order, as you'll see in a moment. And for those of you who perhaps maybe have containers coming in from abroad, we can book in via containers, as you'll see on the screen in a moment. So there's all sorts of other things that we can do to speed up that process of booking in. But just for the purpose of today's demo, I'm just going to book in that one purchase order. So there we go. There's receive purchase order. And obviously I can filter by my supplier, but for the moment, I'm going to filter by that purchase order number 5269. There's my good old umbrellas are us. And it's going to list all of the items that I need to be booking in. Now, this is where, of course, if you do have barcode labels on the items, then of course I would just simply scan those, but I don't have barcode labels. So as you can see I can still key in the item. So don't worry if you do have suppliers that send you items with no labels on, you can still book the items in. And as you'll see, I then have the capacity to be able to then produce a barcode label. I can then take a photo of that item, and in a matrix style of rather bizarre photo opportunity, you'll see using our documents module then that will be stored against that purchase order back in Sage. Now, for those of you who have batch traceability, serial numbers, it will force me to put that information in as well, but I just didn't have all of that set up on those stock items. So there we go. I can print the label, I can confirm receipt, I can confirm receipt direct to bin, but I can also automatically allocate those items to a works order if they were required for a works order. So if I say confirm receipt, and we'll pop in our usual supplier GRN, confirm receiving purchase order. So as you'll see in a moment, that will be received as a purchase order, and we're just basically booking those items in. So let's come back to the purchase order so you can see that those are now booked in. Let's just park that works order for a second, and you'll see that I can then book those items in. So there we go. That's now booked in. So can you see there? All of those are now booked in for me. As easy as that. So let's come back now to my works order for a second. And you'll see that if I come back to my works order now, bear with me 2 seconds. Right, so as you can see, we've booked those items in. They've automatically allocated to the works order for me. And at this point, as you'll see when we come back into barcoding in a moment, we can then go and pick those items from the barcoding device. Of course, once again, if you're the kind of organization that has some form of batch traceability, then you've either got the ability to allocate the batch at this point, or you've got the ability to get your staff to allocate the batch. But of course, we've just automatically booked those in. So let's flick back to the barcoding device, shall we? So as you can see, we've picked a couple of items already. I'm just going to finish off picking the rest of these goods. So we've got our components for the good old Sicon umbrella. And obviously, you know, again, I don't need to be necessarily popping in the quantity. I can just very simply scan these items to speed up that process. It's just that I don't have a barcode label for each of these specific materials. So the last 2 items and our good old wood for the umbrella. And then all I'm basically doing is once I've picked them, so each of those areas was telling me where to go and pick, is I just simply say, I've picked the items. As you can see, I can put them back on the shelf if I really needed to. So we've issued now all of those parts. And then very simply, we're just going to say we're going to book in 5 of those items. So we're simply telling Sage that we've booked in that, and we're telling Sage where we're booking those items in. And if we now come back, so that's done. It's simple as possible. I don't need any bits of paper. I don't need to go back to the office now and key in the fact that I've issued and booked that in. As you'll see now, if we come back to that works order, that's now booked in. So if we just amend that works order, there we go, that's booked in. So if we now go back to the sales order that was specifically related to, which as we can see at the top of the screen is 6238. So you can always see which sales order that's actually aligned to. If we now go back to sales order processing, all we're simply going to do, back to top of the page, sales orders, 6238. All we're simply going to do is dispatch that. But before, obviously, I'm going to dispatch this now through the barcoding device, but I just want to make sure that we've actually allocated that to the sales order, because if it's not allocated, then of course we can't dispatch it out through the barcoding device. So the first thing is that we've automatically set that to requires to be picked. And that just simply means that it will appear on the device. So that's our mechanism, that if we don't want the items to appear on the device, then we can untick that one. And it's a mechanism, as I said, just to make sure that we're not having orders appearing on the device unless we've controlled it. So there we go, that's allocated. If we now come back to the device, you'll see very simply, let's just close that down so we can pick it. Otherwise, if we've left it open, we wouldn't be able to. I come back to my device, come back to sales order processing, dispatch sales orders, 6238. And of course, I can also filter by the name of the company as well. Now it's just simply warning me, look, you've already got some other orders for that customer, same address. Do you want me to create a wave pick? So that's just a mechanism to consolidate all of those sales orders up together rather than me having to individually pick all of them. I'm going to say no for the purpose of the demo today. So that's just loading that for me. I've got the information about the sales order number, customer delivery address, etc. And it's just telling me what I need to go and pick. So I can pick that item, and it's telling me the bin location that I need to go to in order to pick that. So I'm going to pick it. I can even take a photo of that item. So if I want to actually take a photo of it, and essentially all that's going to happen is that's then going to store that against the sales order back in standard Sage sales order processing. Bit of a matrix moment going on there with a barcode within a barcode within a barcode. But we've got our item that we've picked. If we wanted to, we could pack that into a piece of packaging, and we can specify the packaging that we want it to go into. And in fact, we've even got the ability now to preset dimensions and weights and volumes of those packaging, which can be changed if necessary. But essentially, the whole idea is that we can preset all of that in the background. So I'm going to say that we've packed that item, and at this point we can either print the labels to go in the packaging, or of course, as I'm about to do, I'm going to dispatch that. Now, we can link to couriers, but unfortunately we don't link to any Irish courier. So I'm going to say DPD next day, and that's now going to dispatch that out. And as you'll see in a moment, it's going to automatically update the sales order to say that it's been dispatched. And also, using our documents module, it will then automatically push that back out to the customer. So as we come back into that sales order, you'll see that that's now dispatched it automatically. So again, I'm not having to take bits of paper to the office to say that it's been dispatched. There we go, that's dispatched automatically. And if we look at our little view documents, this is a separate little module. You'll see now that I've got a couple of documents automatically attached to this. So there'll be that strange looking photo that we took a minute ago. So there's the image that I took on the device. And it's also attached the dispatch note against that as well at the same time for me. And then finally, as you'll see, if I just come back to my Outlook, you'll see that that's also emailed out the dispatch note for me. So if I just refresh that a second, there we go. So there's my dispatch note with a copy of the item to go with it as well. So it can automatically email out the dispatch note to the customer, along with potentially, if you want to start sending technical information or a product specification or maybe an image of the item, it'll do all of that automatically for you. So we've covered a number of different items this afternoon. We've covered document automation, the conversion of a customer's purchase order to a sales order into standard stage sales order processing. We've used works order processing. We've run material resource planning. We've also used barcoding to pick those items, to book the stock in and dispatch the items. And then we've used documents to, again, store the image against a purchase order or sales order and then email out that dispatch note.